Imagine a group chat with your smartest, most opinionated friends. A massive, polarizing news story breaks. The notification pops up on your screen. The tension spikes. And then nobody clicks the link.
Right. Nobody fires off a hot take?
Exactly. Nobody. They just sit there connected in absolute silence.
I mean, it sounds almost like a glitch in the Matrix, right? Because we are so heavily conditioned by the architecture of the internet to treat literally every notification as a demand.
Oh, absolutely. A demand for immediate labor.
Yeah, intellectual or emotional labor.
Yeah.
So to simply observe that demand, and choose not to react, it feels almost like an act of rebellion.
And for you listening right now, I know exactly how heavy that demand feels because you're someone we think of as the learner.
Yeah.
You're curious, you want to understand the world, but
you're constantly navigating an absolute tsunami of information.
right. You want to stay informed without feeling completely drained by the end of the day.
And, that is the core mission of today's Deep Dive. We are exploring a radically different approach to digital communication, one that feels like the exact antidote to modern exhaustion.
And the source material guiding us today is, it's this fascinating contemplative text. It's called The Architecture of Being Human, a Virtual Neighborhood Journey.
Such a great title.
Right. And right from the beginning, it poses this profound premise. It basically argues that our underlying need for one another, our human connection, it isn't some biological vulnerability. It is literally the architecture of being human.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand what happens when these people actually choose silence, we first need to understand the minds participating in this space.
Yeah, that's crucial.
The text describes this group not just as random avatars on a screen, but as a map of the conscience of modern man. They represent this global virtual neighborhood built on a single, non-negotiable foundation, which is trust. Which is an essential starting point. I mean, the text argues that mutual love and respect can only flourish where mutual trust has already been established.
Right.
So to map out this modern conscience, the narrative introduces us to 4 distinct states of mind. They're represented by 4 characters. And it's best to look at them as like opposing poles of how we interact with the world.
Okay, who do we have first?
Well, on one end, you have Nephew. He's 32. He's an entrepreneur based in Bursa, Turkey. And he is basically the pulse of the digital age.
So he's all about speed, right? Speed in the quest for meaning.
Exactly. His driving philosophy is that conversation is the mechanism through which thought learns to speak.
Oh, I like that. He represents that outward-facing, highly active energy we all feel, when we're trying to rapidly process new information online.
Yes. And acting as the counterbalance to that sheer velocity is Uncle.
Okay, tell me about Uncle.
So Uncle is 72, based in Istanbul, and he represents measure and tranquility. He basically operates as the conscience of the text. But what makes Uncle so compelling is his specific worldview. He doesn't carry that cliche attitude of an elder simply saying, I've seen a lot. His attitude is, I've filtered a lot.
Oh, wow. That distinction is brilliant.
It really is.
Because I've seen a lot just means you've survived the passage of time. I've filtered a lot implies an active, rigorous curation of wisdom, right?
Exactly. It means he has deliberately chosen what to let into his mind and what to keep out.
He believes life is only measured correctly when it refuses to deceive itself. So, okay, we have the tension between Nephew's speed and Uncle's tranquil filtering. But how does this neighborhood keep from just, splitting into 2 extremes?
Well, that's where the mediating forces come in. So we have Roger. He's a 42-year-old living in Wayne, New Jersey.
Okay, so bringing it into totally different geography.
Right. He brings a crucial cross-cultural perspective. He represents universal reason and ethics. Roger sits right at that complex intersection of the digital realm and the real world.
So he's the analytical mind, the one trying to make sense of algorithms and the ethical implications of our digital habits.
Spot on. And then bringing it all together is Ant. She is 52, and honestly, she might be the most fascinating voice in the text.
Why is that?
Because she represents the perfect balance of compassion and piercing realism. She introduces this incredibly nuanced view of how human excellence actually progresses over time.
Yeah, I remember reading this part. It's so interesting.
She maps out human evolution not in biological terms, but in stages of attitude.
Right?
She argues that we begin with a purely physical attitude like basic survival and reaction to stimuli. From there, we progress to a scientific or mental attitude where we learn to categorize and analyze the world.
Okay, physical, then mental.
Then next, we evolve into an artistic or emotional attitude, developing empathy and connection. But the final culmination, the peak of human excellence, is the ethical or moral attitude.
Which, I mean, that makes perfect sense when you apply it to how we behave online.
Well, think about it. You can physically react to a post, right? You can analyze its data. You can get highly emotional about it.
But achieving that final moral stage requires stepping back.
Exactly. It requires considering the ethical weight of your engagement.
And Odd anchors this moral stage in the concept of piety, or taqwa. In this context, taqwa translates to a deep, grounding mindfulness of a higher moral consciousness.
Like an internal compass.
Right, an internal compass that constantly checks the ego. Because she operates from this level of mindfulness, she doesn't view differences of opinion as reasons for separation. She views humanity as a shared legacy.
Which means differences are just the exact friction needed to build robust trust.
Exactly.
Think of these 4 characters as the different tabs you have open in your brain on any given day.
Oh, that's a great analogy. You've got your anxious, fast-paced rolling tab, that's nephew. You've got your analytical, problem-solving tab, that's Roger. You've got your deeply empathetic, big picture tab, it's aunt. And hopefully, quietly running in the background, you have your inner wise elder tab, uncle, trying to bring some measure to the chaos.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the author is basically providing a framework for our own internal dialogue. When you open an app, which of these consciousness states is driving your behavior?
Right.
By structuring a neighborhood where these forces interact with mutual trust, the text sets the stage for a radically different kind of digital event.
Which brings us to scene 1. Let's set the stage here. The notification sound pings on Roger's phone. But the narrative explicitly notes that this time, the sound carries no urgency.
Right, it's just a soft ping.
The usual crew is online. Uncle is there, nephew is typing, aunt is joined. But the normal transactional nature of the internet just stops. Nobody drops a trending link. Nobody asks a question.
And Uncle observes this anomaly and types out a profound realization. He says, "We've been talking for a long time, but for the first time, we are together in silence."
Together in silence.
Yeah. It forces us to confront how utterly foreign the concept of assured silence is in our modern digital experience. I mean, being online with someone almost exclusively demands the exchange of data.
Nephew picks up on this immediately, too. He realizes that they aren't there to share a piece of content. They are there to think together.
Yes.
He points out this glaring flaw in our digital lives. We see a massive amount of content on social media, but we aren't looking at it from the same place.
That is such a piercing critique of the modern feed. We assume that because millions of people are looking at the same viral video or news story, that we share a collective reality.
But we don't.
No. Nephew recognizes that the barrage of images doesn't create shared meaning because everyone's internal vantage point is totally fractured. They're consuming the exact same data, but processing it through vastly different layers of anxiety or bias or anger.
Wait, though I have to ask, if I'm in a group text with my family or friends and nobody is saying anything, that usually implies a problem.
Sure, it feels awkward.
Right. It means someone is upset or we're ignoring each other. A chat is designed for chatting. Why does the text argue that this specific silence is a profound form of connection?
Well, the characters wrestle with that exact tension. And Roger provides the diagnosis for why this silence feels so necessary. He says, a person does not lose the truth, but loses the way of speaking with it.
Oh, wow. Loses the way of speaking with it. That is incredibly sharp.
Isn't it? The mechanism of digital communication, the character limits, the algorithms that reward outrage, the performative nature of public feeds it corrupts our ability to articulate truth genuinely.
Yeah, because you might have a perfectly valid truth, but the medium forces you to use it as a weapon.
Exactly. To dunk on someone else or as a tool for validation. The truth remains, but the way of speaking it is lost.
And Nephew adds that this specific loss is the exact reason our inner peace vanishes. By choosing silence, they are making a deliberate decision to step off that exhausting treadmill.
Yeah, Uncle describes it as being there without trying to convince anyone and without trying to teach anyone. They are simply trying to, quote, remain human.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because Aunt takes this abstract feeling and completely reframes the dynamic. She suggests that framing their interaction as a conversation is actually the problem. Instead, They should view it as a journey.
And that shift in vocabulary, it changes the entire architecture of the relationship.
Right.
Because a conversation online often implies an exchange of arguments. There's this subtle pressure to be the smartest person in the room. But a journey, that implies a shared destination. You are moving through time and experience alongside one another.
And Uncle embraces this instantly. He notes that on a journey, not everyone has to speak the entire time. Sometimes one person simply looks at the road, sometimes one person carries the heavy load, and sometimes, well, you just remain silent together.
It strips away the performative burden. In that context, silence is no longer an awkward absence of words. It becomes active companionship. They have reached a state where simply being present with one another is enough.
But as we all know, the outside world rarely respects your inner peace for very long, which launches us into scene 2, the arrival of the agenda.
Right. The peaceful silence is shattered by a new notification. A sharp, familiar news headline pops up. And I should note, the source material is very deliberate in keeping the specifics of this news completely ambiguous.
So it doesn't matter what the topic is.
No, it doesn't matter if it's left-wing outrage or right-wing panic. The headline merely represents the polarizing, exhausting nature of the daily digital agenda.
It's that specific type of notification that makes your heart rate spike just reading the preview on your lock screen.
Oh, we all know that feeling.
The text describes it as the kind of news where some people instantly become absolutely certain, some get furiously angry, and the rest are forcibly pushed to take sides.
Which makes this the ultimate test of the trust they've just built in their silence. The cultural script dictates that they must immediately start firing off opinions. But Uncle makes a proposition that goes against every rule of the modern internet.
What does he say?
He says, let's talk without opening the link. First, let's see ourselves, then the news.
Now, I have to push back here because this sounds highly counterintuitive.
Go for it.
If I pull up a news story and decide to start debating it without actually reading the article, I'm usually just being ignorant. We constantly tell people to read past the headline. Isn't nephew right to be worried when he asks if they're just going to end up talking without knowing?
This raises an important question, and it forces us to look at the moral framework of how we consume information. Uncle answers nephew's concern with perhaps the most vital ethical point of the narrative.
Okay.
He says, sometimes to remain silent without knowing is more ethical than to shout knowingly.
Let that settle for a moment.
To remain silent without knowing is more ethical than to shout knowingly. Just consider the mechanism of how modern society assigns moral value. We have built a culture that equates loud, immediate, visceral reactions with sensitivity and care.
Right. If a crisis happens and you aren't posting a highly articulated take within the hour, the digital panopticon implies you are indifferent or even complicit.
We demand immediate proof of empathy through content creation.
Yeah.
And Uncle is dismantling that entire structure. He is suggesting that true moral sensitivity might actually look like restraint. It is the profound humility to recognize your own limits and say, I do not need to urgently consume and broadcast my stance on this crisis to validate my humanity.
So refusing to shout knowingly isn't ignorance. It's a refusal to participate in the cheapening of the truth.
Precisely.
And Ant connects this philosophical idea directly to the listener's daily reality. She asks Uncle if this means we simply don't have to keep up with everything. And Uncle delivers this incredibly clarifying distinction. He says, keeping up is one thing, caring is another.
And that distinction explains the root of our modern digital exhaustion. Keeping up is a cognitive function. It's basic information processing.
You see a headline, register the event, move on.
Exactly. But caring is an emotional and psychological internalization.
Think about your own habits for a second, right? You probably open your apps just trying to keep up. You want to stay culturally literate. You want to know what your peers are talking about.
Pure FOMO.
Yeah, FOMO. But the sheer volume of trauma, debate, and crisis, all designed to hack your attention, means you don't just stay informed, you absorb it. Suddenly, your shoulders are tense, your anxiety is spiking, and you are literally carrying the emotional weight of a dozen global agendas that you have zero control over.
And Roger voices this exact vulnerability in the text. He admits that people are terrified of falling behind the agenda. They're afraid that if they don't carry the weight and speak on it, they'll be dismissed by their peers. The fear of social exile is what drives the endless scrolling.
But Ant flips the perspective entirely. She observes the group's dynamic and realizes something profound. She says, it's not that agendas exhaust us. We exhaust the agendas.
We fundamentally misunderstand the power dynamic. We view ourselves as passive victims of a relentless news cycle.
Right, like it's happening to us.
Yeah, but Ant points out that we are actually the fuel. We feed the machine with our emotional energy, pouring our anxiety and outrage into these endless cycles until we are completely depleted. The agenda only has power because we exhaust ourselves trying to make it validate our worldview.
Which leads perfectly to the climax of the story. Roger's looking at this unclicked link, and he asks the group, if we were to open this, if we were to break our silence and dive into this news, what would we actually be looking at?
And Uncle provides the diagnosis for the entire digital age. He replies, not every piece of news is a window. Some are mirrors.
Let's really examine the psychology of that. A window is an opening. It requires you to look outward, to observe a reality outside of yourself, to do the hard work of understanding complex external facts. A mirror does absolutely none of that. A mirror simply reflects your own image back at you.
Uncle is exposing the true function of the outrage cycle. When we frantically click on highly polarizing links, we rarely do it because we want a window into objective truth.
No.
We do it because we are desperately seeking a mirror. We want to see our own pre-existing biases confirmed. We want our anger validated. We want to look at the chaos and see a reflection that tells us you are right and they are wrong.
And nephew hears this, and it completely rewires his understanding of the internet. He realizes that the core issue isn't the content of the news agenda at all. He types slowly, then the matter is not what the news is, but what we are.
The locus of control instantly shifts. By recognizing the news as a mirror, nephew realizes that reacting to it frantically doesn't change the external world. It only distorts their internal soul. And the narrative notes that after nephew makes this profound statement, nobody sends an emoji. Nobody rushes past the realization with a quick reaction. They just sit with the weight of it, recognizing that their trust and their shared silence are actively being tested by the temptation of the mirror.
So what does this all mean for us? The narrative concludes by showing us the outcome of this restraint. For the first time, instead of allowing themselves to be dragged through the daily outrage cycle, these four characters chose to remain within themselves. They preserved their inner peace, and in doing so, they preserve the very architecture of being human.
It demonstrates that maintaining true connection and, ethical integrity requires incredibly strict boundaries. It requires the wisdom to differentiate between a digital notification that is a genuine invitation to learn and one that is merely a trap designed to hijack your emotional stability.
Right.
By choosing not to click the link, they aren't burying their heads in the sand. They are actively choosing the journey of companionship over the arena of debate.
It is such a powerful framework. So as we synthesize this for you, the learner, navigating the modern world does not require you to have a perfectly crafted take on every single shifting agenda that pops up on your screen. You do not have to click every link to prove you are engaged with humanity.
Because doing so, as we've seen, might actually cause you to lose the way of speaking the truth altogether. When you force every thought through the meat grinder of digital debate, you lose the nuance and compassion required to actually connect with people.
Sometimes the ultimate act of wisdom and the key to preserving your own mental well-being is choosing to activate that Uncle Tap in your mind. It is embracing the radical act of filtering.
Yeah, totally.
It's recognizing that sometimes simply existing online alongside people in a space of grace and shared silence is vastly more important than winning an argument. It's knowing, deep down, the difference between keeping up and carrying.
It undeniably requires immense discipline, though, to look at a flashing red notification, acknowledge it, and say, I'm going to leave that there. I do not need to carry this today. But that discipline, that taqwa or moral restraint, is the foundation of the trust that keeps our virtual neighborhoods from collapsing into pure hostility.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over today as you navigate your own feeds and group chats. It builds on the psychology we just unpacked. If, as Uncle so wisely points out, the endless news agendas and outrage cycles we obsess over are actually mirrors reflecting our own internal state back to us, what exactly is the reflection we are so terrified of seeing in the quiet moments that we constantly use notifications to look away?
That is a deeply uncomfortable but entirely necessary question to sit with.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of being human. We hope you find a moment of shared, peaceful silence in your own virtual neighborhood today. Take care, and we'll catch you next time.